Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 145th episode of Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Over 20 months ago, in April 2020, when the pandemic had just set in and schools had closed down, we at Notebook felt it was our duty to set up a platform for educators to connect meaningfully on, discussing problems they were facing with the rising need of digital education and online learning, and arrive at a common solution. Today, 144 episodes later, this platform has grown much bigger than we had anticipated, thanks to your love and support. We have discussed extremely curricular topics here like digital learning and NEP, extracurricular topics like sports, house system, games. We have discussed school management, exams, and even evolved topics like mental health. Over the last decade or so, we have repeatedly heard the statement data is the new oil. Themes such as big data and data analytics have been making headlines. In fact, just a couple of days back, Parag Agrawal was promoted to the role of CEO at Twitter, replacing founder CEO Jack Dorsey. His ascent has been largely attributed to his comfort and reliance on data for decision making. Over the coming years, it will become more and more crucial for professionals to be data oriented. Also, in a world rife with fake news, the more data oriented an individual is, lesser is the chance of the individual falling prey to bad judgment arising out of rumors and fear mongering. As more and more data becomes available, the ability to analyze it, process it, and derive actionable insights from it is what will set the leaders apart. In the CBSE curriculum, data representation is a recurrent theme in maths. We first see it in class 1, and then again in class 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up to class 12. Today, we shall take a look at how schools are going above and beyond the curriculum to ensure that the students are prepared for a data savvy world. To discuss this, our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as a deputy headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Barrett served the Doon School as housemaster, head of department, dean of activities, dean of student welfare, deputy headmaster, second master, and acting headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Barrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist, and we at Notebook are privileged to have him as our senior advisor. Sir, thank you so much for being here today. Over to you.
Thank you, Shubayu, for that introduction. And a very good evening to everyone at the Notebook team. I must tell you that this topic is scaring me. I'm not very good at the topic and what it suggests. So you please pardon me when I refer to some of the notes that I put down. I'm not too much a data person myself, Shubayu, but we live in an age where data reigns supreme and everyone is looking for data. Data is power. If you look at the data the government has on us through our Aadhaar cards, CC camera footage, wherever we go, whether it's biometrics or, they know all about us. They know about our likes and dislikes and our shopping preferences, our taste in music and food, where we spend our money, where we travel, etc. And the more control they have, the more data they have. And the more data they have, the more control they have. So in a way, have we lost our privacy? Do speed cameras always get the right person to challan? I'm quite confused about the efficacy and power of using data. While I am certainly one who likes data, I like to use data, especially when it comes to health and longevity and things like that. I believe that data and what I do with is important. But at times, I think I need to follow my own instincts and my hunches. I need to live by intuition and feeling and not be driven by data always, because sometimes it can be misleading. So in my view, data refers to inputs and facts and numbers and figures. And while it has always been around with us, in the last few decades, it has become, greater than it was ever before. My subject, geography, in the 60s, we learned the length of rivers and the heights of mountains and the extent of deserts, the and now this was the only data we got to know. And I wanted to get away from data. Geography was not about lengths and heights. But when I went and studied some of the books that the IGCSE does in the British syllabus, I was surprised because their geography syllabus was entirely data-based. They were doing all sorts of graphs and mathematical formulae to tell you the mineral size or the sand size on beaches in England. They talked about river systems and drainage patterns, and entire possibility of flooding was based on mathematical data. Weather data was in the MONEX project, it's a monsoon experiment project, was all data driven. Graphs and computers and columns and algorithms where you fed in data and you got possibilities of rain or poor monsoons. It was all data driven geography. My subject was changing entirely. Of course, ever since watches and calculators and digital weighing scales, BP machines came into my life, I just thought we were going into a futuristic world. I just learned to get my head around analog watches and into digital watches when the Apple Watch was even more confusing, because the amount of data that watch gives you is much more than time. And do we need all that data is what I ask. Generally, we have come to realize that we cannot escape from a data-driven world. And data is put together by human observation, human experiment, by human effort. And then this data can also change over time. Data on medical dosages and food intake cannot be relied upon permanently. What is high blood pressure today and what is diabetes today, what figures constitute diabetes, might change tomorrow. Everything changes. Data has come into our lives in so many ways. Weather data may be important for pilots as well as fishermen, but much more so for pilots, because a pilot who's doing mid-air refueling has to be much more tuned into micro data readings rather than the fishermen. It doesn't have to be so accurate. The CIAT cricket ratings, for example, and Shubayu will be very, very familiar with this, as he, I think, was involved with this. You rate people on the input of data over years, and it's all computerized. And pop comes best batsman for the year and the best bowler for the year, because everything is data driven. Today, during cricket commentaries, at the press of a button, the commentator can tell you how many minutes since the batsman last sneezed, and all that data driven in cricket. You also have the school ratings, which Education World came out. It's again data driven, and you rate schools on certain parameters based on data inputs. Now, as I said earlier, and I thought always data was for the maths nerds, but it's not. In the late 90s, teacher appraisals came into the school I was working in, and we put figures to everything, marks obtained by students, number of over 90%, attendance, hours of work. We put a weightage to the type of work we were doing, the type of extracurriculars we were doing. So if I ran the AV squad and somebody else ran the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, there were figures for that too. There was graphs and standard deviations and mean, medians, and modes. And we were assessed. And mind you, our salaries were dependent on these figures that popped up after you fed in this data. And what did we have? We got certain teachers who were paid more than others. And let me tell you, some of the poorest teachers got the highest salaries, and most effective teachers were way down. So I think the data was not always correct in the way we assess teachers. Now, on the other hand, analyzing and interpreting data provides a holistic view of school involvement and fosters a collective accountability and responsibility for data and responsibility for results. And data is not about standardized scores alone in teaching. In teaching, perceptions and relationships are as important as curriculum and practice. Schools use data from parents, students, classrooms, and teachers to assess the success of a school. Parents and clients select schools based on data. Data on children's results, attention span, abilities have greatly aided teachers to improve a child's learning, the quality of teaching. In future, too, changes in the way we teach and how we teach it and when we teach it and why we teach it will also be driven by data that we collect from classrooms. Now, I talked about school ratings and and how parents these days are selecting schools based on data. Now, also the amount of data on children categorizes them into learning disability groups. In my days, you could be dyslexic or you could be autistic and no one knew. Today, children are being microscopically graded into he's dyslexic or he's mildly dyslexic on the whole spectrum. And this is leading to a lot of use of medicines and drugs to cure these children. Now, what is driving this data? Do we need to have all this? Too much data, as I said earlier, removes this gut feeling, our hunches, our inbuilt power, our instinct. When we become too data conscious, we are only depending on what instruments tell us. At the same time, so many of our policies and government laws are based on data, whether it be health, education, human behavior. For example, when I have data on women's crime in a certain area, this has led to certain laws which have strengthened patrolling and, so that women are more aware and it's a safer place to live. And we live in a world of datafication. And so much of our daily decisions are data driven. Whether it's COVID and how we avoid COVID, we were always clued into data that came out once the pandemic hit. Whether it's investments or mutual funds or bank interest rates, petrol consumption, we are a data conscious people. College cutoff marks, it's also data. Does a 99% student necessarily be better than somebody who's got 80? Should we base so much of our lives on data? It is not doctors, but statisticians who tell us that only 5% of the population dies of lung cancer. But of this 5%, 90% are smokers. So what does that tell us? Do we need to cut out smoking? Only 5% get lung cancer. Is it a risk worth taking? Now, I know we live in a STEM world, STEM, and then we've added the E to make it STEAM, because too much data makes us robotic. We want to be human, want to get away from data at times. What about the art and the music and the literature? It doesn't do with data. They deal with variations, interpretations, instead of doing things, based on figures. Let's say data has certain myths. Some of the myths that I've noted down are the best qualified teachers are the best teachers. Not really. The most expensive shoes last the longest. Who said? The most expensive cars are always the best on the roads in India. The man with the lowest cholesterol level will live the longest, healthiest life. Not true. More money means more data means more money. Not true. One needs a lot of data to have the best insights and ideas. While we live in a data-driven age, where so much rests on the data we have, whether it's medical data, economic data, every day life changes, and we get into this obsession with data. Yes, I think our children are to some extent data-driven. They need to be. We need to teach them what data is important and what is not. We need to be their guides and teach them when to follow and what to depend on. Is 98.5 degrees temperature for everyone? Not necessarily. I think they should not be fixated on data, but they need to be discerning. Where does this data come from? What are the sources of this data? We need to teach them a good data from bad data and how to sift. I think they need to understand that data is there to help us, but we need to use our common sense and understanding and experience when dealing with the world. Shubhayu, I think I'm groping in the dark here, but that's all I have on data. I thank you very much for listening. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the beautiful introduction to the topic. For somebody who claimed to be very scared of the topic, I would say your fear went from 100 to 0 in about 0.3 seconds to speak in the language of data. Sir, thank you so much for the introduction.
Kind of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker on this topic is Achin Bhattacharya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, a fellow of ICAI, and a member of CPA Australia and CPA Ireland. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shubha, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
Once again, welcome all of you to today's session on a very interesting and contemporary topic. Let me take you back to 2004. I remember an article in New York Times. If you remember, in 2004, Hurricane Francis was on its way, barreling across the Caribbean and threatening a direct hit on Florida's Atlantic coast. Residents made for higher ground. People were trying to find shelter. But far away, executives at Walmart's headquarters decided that the situation offered a great opportunity for one of the newest data-driven weapons, predictive technology, which could really be put to use to not only increase their business, but to actually help people in distress. And how did they go about doing that? A week ahead of the storm's landfall, Walmart's chief information officer pressed her staff to come up with forecasts based on what had happened when Hurricane Charlie struck several weeks earlier. Backed by the trillions of bytes of worth of shoppers' history that is stored in Walmart's data warehouse, she felt that company could start predicting what's going to happen instead of waiting for it to happen. Consider, because then what happens is exactly she knew how shoppers are going to behave. Now, consider why data-driven prediction might be useful in this scenario. It might be useful to predict that people in the path of the hurricane would buy more bottled water. But this point seems a bit obvious, isn't it? And why do we need data science to discover it? It might be useful to project the amount of increase in sales due to hurricane. It will increase, yes. Increase by how much? How do we ensure that local Walmart stores are properly stocked so that people in need, when they reach out, stores don't run out of stock? Perhaps mining that data could reveal that a particular item would be more in demand, but maybe it would be more valuable to discover patterns due to the hurricane that were not that obvious, right? There are certain things that were very obvious. To do this, analysts might examine the huge volume of data in similar situations. We discussed about Hurricane Charlie that has struck a few weeks back, to identify unusual local demand for products From such patterns, the company might be able to anticipate and ensure that stores are adequately stocked. And indeed, this is what exactly happened. The newspaper article in New York Times reported that the experts mined the data and found that the stores would indeed need certain products and not just the usual, flashlight. So when we discuss something about hurricanes, first thing that comes to our mind is bottled water, flashlight, first aid. Of course, yes, but these are quite obvious. What next? And the analysts say that we didn't know in the past that, and something as detailed as strawberry Pop Tarts, a kind of pastry, increased in sales like 7 times their normal sales. They had seen that in previous hurricane. And the pattern exactly repeated itself subsequently. And not only that, with the kind of vast amount of data now available, I think I just give one example, but companies in all industries are focused on utilizing this data for competitive advantage. In the past, if you look at how the way things used to work out, corporates used to employ a team of statisticians, modelers, analysts to explore data sets manually. But the volume and variety of data have far outstripped the capacity of manual analysis. So those days are completely gone. At the same time, computers have become more and more powerful. Networking has become ubiquitous. Algorithms have been developed that can actually connect data sets to enable broader and deeper analysis than previously possible. So the convergence of this phenomena has given rise to this increasingly widespread business application of data science and data mining techniques. Now, the moment we discuss about this, I guess probably the widest application of data mining techniques we see in marketing for tasks like targeted marketing, online advertisement, recommendations for cross-selling, and generally also used for general customer relationship management to analyze customer behavior in order to manage attrition and maximize the expected revenue from a particular customer. Because companies exactly know a customer's tastes and preferences. The finance industry also uses data mining for credit scoring and trading, and in operations via activities like fraud detection, very important, workforce management. So major retailers, like we were discussing about Walmart or maybe the Amazons, apply data mining throughout their businesses. Now, starts from marketing if you go back the value chain, to entire supply chain management. Many firms have differentiated themselves strategically with data science. It's a huge competitive advantage if managed properly. And sometimes there are examples that sometimes to the point of evolving into data mining companies. So their core activity itself changed. So there's a fundamental structure to data analytics and basic principle that should be understood. So areas like intuition, creativity, common sense, domain knowledge are very important when it comes to something like data analysis. And I believe that it is important for children also to understand the basics, to have a data-oriented mindset, to be able to logically and impartially look at facts while making judgments. I completely agree with Bharat, sir, that data analysis by data can never be absolute. There's of course that final element of human judgment, which is of course a higher science, no doubt about it. But while looking at choices, how to objectively, how to impartially, how to maturely evaluate them with the help of data, which should be helpful as a life skill. Now, currently, if you come back to our topic, we are seeing a revolution in activities like advertisement. Due to large part of it is because of huge increase in the amount of time we are spending online. and the ability to literally make split-second decisions. So whether it be sales decisions, whether it be shifting brand loyalties. And the moment we discuss something about data processing, the other term which always comes in, at times used interchangeably, is big data. Now, big data essentially means that databases are too large for traditional systems, traditional data processing systems cannot analyze them. They're too large and therefore require new processing technologies. Imagine the entire data set of people who are walking into an airport, and if that is stored day after day, month after month, year after year, maybe to predict their shopping patterns. So this kind of huge data, or maybe at a multi-departmental store. So as with traditional technologies, big data technologies are used for many tasks, including data engineering. Now, if you look at today's age, and if you look at jobs for future, analytical skills is one of the skills which is very much in demand, and this demand is only projected to increase with time. Consulting firm McKinsey estimates that there'll be a shortage of talent necessary for organizations to take advantage of big data. Crunching numbers, getting that numbers in place is all useless unless until you can analyze it and take corrective action. I think that is where the next growth story lies. In 2018, US alone faced a shortage of around 150,000 people with deep analytical skills, and 1.5 million managers and analysts with the know-how how to use the analysis of big data to make effective decisions. Now, I find this very interesting. Why 10 times as many managers and analysts than those with deep analytical skills? On one hand, we say 150,000 people with analytical skills, and we say 1.5 million people to manage them. Surely data scientists aren't so difficult to manage that they need 10 managers. The reason is that a business can get leverage from data science for making better decisions in multiple areas of business. So you collect data at a single point. There's a huge repository, but as we discussed, it can be used at multiple places, starting from marketing to supply chain management to advertisement. There are many areas, to finance. However, as McKinsey pointed out, the managers in those areas need to understand the fundamentals of data science to effectively get that leverage. Now, why so? If I may draw an analogy, the state of data science may be compared to that of chemistry in the mid-19th century, when theories and general principles were being formulated and the field was largely experiential. So every good chemist had to be a competent lab technician as well. Similarly, it is hard to imagine a working data scientist who is not proficient with certain sorts of software tools in today's age. But in 10 years' time, the predominant technologies will likely to have changed or advanced enough that a discussion here would be completely obsolete, while the general principles are the same as they were 20 years ago and are likely to change little over the coming decades. I read about a very wonderful case study. For paucity of time, I will not go into details of it, but I will encourage all of you to look up to the internet and read about it. The national science experiment that took place in Singapore, exactly with regard to on this particular topic, so as to ensure the students develop a data-driven mindset. Now, the other question is the ethical part. So we are discussing about data, we are discussing about the advantages. So far, so good. But the question is it completely ethical? Is it completely ethical that our each and every purchase, and forget purchase, our each and every site visit, our each and every store visit is being monitored, systematically recorded, at a later date being analyzed, and we are accordingly send various offers, etc., so as to ensure impulse purchase. On one hand, it might be very convenient. Instead of we looking out for offers, looking out for new arrivals, we are directly getting that information. Wonderful. On the other hand, I think there's also an ethical dilemma with regard to the entire aspect of privacy. And privacy is very important. There's no doubt about it. There's been quite a few major litigations around the world on this particular topic. Because today it is no longer enough to automate information flows about us. The goal now is to automate us. These processes are meticulously designed to produce ignorance by circumventing individual awareness and thus eliminate any possibility of self-determination. So I remember a very famous data scientist once said, and those few lines, are so striking. The scientist said that we can engineer the context around a particular behavior and force change that way. We are learning, and this one is very interesting. The scientist said that we are learning how to write the music, and then we let the music make them dance. So the expectation is that not only our behavior will be predicted, but such kind of analysis will also ensure that we behave in a particular way. But again, there are good applications, there are wonderful applications as well. I was reading about another very wonderful case study. I would again encourage all of you to look up for this. Huge number of college dropouts that are happening in North America. So there's a study on this, that how data science could be used effectively to reduce the number of dropouts by ensuring that they exactly know what they're getting into when they're enrolling for college. Do they exactly know what this course is all about? Do they exactly know what the career options are? What kind of students are dropping out? Do they need extra help? Do they need extra counseling, mentoring, support, maybe peer level buddy support? So these are wonderful applications of data sciences. So the benefits, when we discuss about benefits are amazing. In early 2018, Uber upgraded its customer obsession ticket assistant, COTA, as we call it, a tool that uses machine learning and natural language processing to help agents improve speed and accuracy when responding to support tickets. So it used prescriptive analysis to examine whether a product's new iteration would be more effective than its initial version. So while introducing anything new, they exactly knew that these are the kind of issues and challenges that are going to come, and these are the resolutions. They went one step ahead. Other example, with regard to revenue, research by McKinsey shows that organizations that invest in big data yield a 6% average increase in profits, which is huge, which jumps to 9% for investment over a period of 5 years. There are other studies which even predicted this number to be as high as 10%, study by Bark. Again, improved operational efficiency, the other very important aspect. In a recent KPMG report on emerging trends in infra, it was found out that many firms now use predictive analysis to anticipate maintenance and operational issues before they become larger problems. So we anticipate maintenance, and instead of breakdown maintenance, preventive maintenance is prescribed. But considering the limited bandwidth, focus is on areas where we anticipate more challenges. A mobile network operator survey noted that it leverages data to foresee outage 7 days before they occur. So 7 days before data outage occur, mobile operator already knows that, okay, these are the areas where I'm anticipating challenges. And armed with this information, they can actually prevent outages by more effectively, A, timing maintenance, B, enabling it not to only save on costs, operational cost, but ensure it keeps assets at optimal performance level. So we see that so much good work is happening around the world. And again, coming to jobs for the future, LinkedIn lists business analysis as one of the skills companies would need most in coming years. Up to 2026, the expectation is that the demand for such jobs would grow at 27%, which is huge. But the question is that a lot of people crunch numbers, but then that's only the basic part of it. I think there are very limited positions in terms of number crunching, considering the fact that the other side of technology and processes are getting automated. So unless job aspirants, unless our children in future can help interpret those analysis in the context in which business is competing, there are challenges. But then again, these challenges are opportunity in itself. So I'd like to end by telling you a small incident about two games of chess. First happened in 1997, in which Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, a machine. To many, this was the dawn of a new era. You know, Grandmaster, someone of the stature of Garry Kasparov, losing to a machine. One where man would be dominated by machine. But 20 years on, there's a second game, which was a freestyle chess tournament. This happened in 2005, in which a man and machine could enter together as partners rather than adversaries, if they so choose. At first, the results were predictable. Even a supercomputer was beaten by a grandmaster. It was a freestyle chess competition, and the grandmaster had a relatively weak laptop with him. On the other hand, on the other side, we had a supercomputer, but the grandmaster won. It was very predictable. The surprise came at the end. Subsequently, ultimately, who won? Not a grandmaster with a supercomputer, but actually two American amateurs were using relatively weak laptops. They were using 3 relatively weak laptops. Their ability to coach and manipulate their computers to deeply explore specific positions, it actually effectively counteracted the superior chess knowledge that grandmasters had and the superior computational power that supercomputers had. So astonishing result, right? Average man, average machine, beating the best man, best machine. But what does it indicate? What does it mean actually? It means that it's about cooperation and the right type of cooperation. And there again, the importance of interpretation of data comes in. So these are some few thoughts that I wanted to share with all of you. We have a wonderful panel here today, and I really look forward to the deliberation on this particular topic. I thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. Over to you, Shubhai.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for sharing those wonderful case studies with us. Ladies and gentlemen, as Achin mentioned, we do have a fantastic panel lined up for you. But before we go on to the panel, a little bit about us here at Notebook. We at Notebook are an EdTech platform. We create short videos pertaining to the school curriculum. What this means is you as a teacher have access to videos pertaining exactly to the topic that you have decided to teach in a particular class. Before you start discussing the topic, playing a short 6 to 10 minute long video gives your students a much better visual grasp of what you're about to teach them. Also, months later, when the students at home need to revise a particular topic, they have access to the same videos on their personal devices, be it a laptop or a smartphone or even a smart TV. They can watch the videos over and over again until they have a crystal clear idea about that particular component of the syllabus. What I will do now is play you a short snippet of one of the Notebook videos so that you know exactly what we are talking about. This particular video goes back to the topic at hand today, which is data.
Hello friends, welcome to Notebook Videos. Here we shall continue to learn about the mean, median and mode. In the last video lesson, we have discussed the three ways by which the arithmetic mean are calculated. If you remember, we found the arithmetic mean for both ungrouped data and grouped data. In this lesson, we shall continue with the median and mode that are yet to be discussed. So let's begin. What is a median? Let's look at an exciting example. Here you see a bar of chocolate. And what if you have to exactly divide the Cadbury bar into two for two little children in front of you who were waiting for equal shares? So you divide the squares on the Cadbury bar equally, and that way you have two equal splits. And you see equal number of squares in two splits. So you have half the distribution of scores below and the other half above. And that, my friend, is where the median lies. It's the midpoint of all data sets.
That was just a very short snippet of one of the notebook videos. If you head over to our website, www.notebook.school, or use our Android and iOS mobile apps, you would have more than 10,000 such videos at your disposal. Well, with that done, it is now my privilege to introduce the wonderful panel that we have lined up for you today. We have with us Madam Shashmita Mohanty, who is the Director Principal of the Sanjay Ghorawat International School in Maharashtra. She's been the Director Principal of the school since 2012, and not only of one school, but the CBSE, CIE, and Junior College divisions. The school is affiliated to Cambridge University, UK, and she takes pride in heading the school with 4,000 students, 350 teachers, and 600 non-teaching staff. She has been one among the 15 educators who were selected for training in Singapore by Worldview and Singapore Airlines. She has been serving as school principal since 2002 and has received appreciation letter from the Honorable HR Minister, Mrs. Smriti Irani, 3 times. She has also received the award of CBSE Sports Promotion. She's received a number of awards. Let me just try and name a few of them. The Mentor Conclave Best Teacher in the World Nations Vikas Jyoti Award, Avantika Shakuntalam Samman, District Level Bharatiya Sahitya Samman Shikshak Ratna Award, Shikshak Bharati Puraskar Best Teacher Award, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Outstanding Principal Award 2016, Adarsh Vidya Saraswati Rashtriya Puraskar by Global Management Council Global Teacher Convention 2016, Global Teacher Role Model Award 2016, 100 Highly Effective Principals of the Year 2016 by Alert Knowledge Services, the Progressive Principles of India 2017 by Rethink India in 2017, at the National Convention of Edu-Leaders in School Education held at New Delhi, the Visionary School Edu-Leaders of India for the year 2017 award, and the Avantika Dr. S. Radhakrishnan Samman 2018 award. Ma'am, thank you so much for making the time to be here today. We are privileged to have you on the panel. We also have with us Captain Dr. Dinisha Bhardwaj Singh, who is an Indian Army officer turned educationist after serving for 10 years in the Elite Defense Forces of India. She holds a PhD and degrees in management, law, and physics. On one side, while she has worked in depth for education from Northeast to almost all parts of the country and abroad, she experienced adventure activities starting from paragliding to river rafting to rock climbing, horse riding, camel expeditions, and trekking. She has presented papers in national and international seminars and has been a panelist, keynote speaker, and moderator on various online and offline forums, along with being a leadership and motivational speaker. She also enjoyed being a casual announcer in All India Radio, Shillong. Social work is a passion, and she is still extending support to various groups in Indore, Shillong, Delhi, and in Malaysia. She is a master trainer with CBSE and has authored and co-authored manuals on safety and security with GIIS, conducive learning with CBSE, and pedagogical leadership with National Institute for Education Planning and Administration in collaboration with CBSE. She has received 6 recognitions and medals and awards from the forces and 14 awards for her contribution in sector of education leaderships and social work from various renowned forums and organizations in India. Currently, she is heading the Global Indian International School in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Ma'am, thank you so much for making the time to be here today. It's wonderful having you back on the panel. We also have with us Rashmi Sinha, who is the principal of the Guru Gobind Singh Public School in Ranchi. Ma'am has more than 25 years of experience in the education sector, out of which 20 years have been in Delhi public schools. She has closely worked with the assessment procedure of the CDSE and has won the Best Teacher Award from Rotary International. She was trained as a teacher facilitator by DPS Society in a program supported by United Nations Population Fund, or what was previously known as the UNFPA. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for being a part of this wonderful panel. I shall start my video now and stop the share so that we can all see each other. I would request all the panelists to kindly switch on their videos. Mohanty ma'am, Dr. Singh, Rashmi ma'am, thank you so much for being here. A very good evening to you.
Good
if I
evening,
may-
everyone.
Good evening, ma'am. Captain Singh, if I may start with you. Ma'am, we are talking today about data orientation. However, while we have always heralded STEM as the more important part, our education is still largely empirical in nature. We go back to facts and just instances that have happened often. How do we ensure that our students are more data oriented than what we perhaps are?
Thank you so much, first of all, to invite me on this forum, Mr. Subhayu, and very good evening, everyone. I was really enjoying listening to the speakers before me, and Mr. Achin almost has covered everything. Now, I would just converge it to, as the question comes, for students and their benefit, and I would also like to add certain aspects which are not directly related to students, but are for their benefits. So starting with students' perspective, first thing we talk about students' growth is, the marks. All boards in our school, we are having two curricula, and third one is on the way for IB. Everywhere, whatever the doctrine says that we don't have to trouble students or whatever, the purpose is ultimately the score which comes good. Now here, I'm sure others also have started using data and data analysis, where we know the patterns and we know how previous batches have done, what current batch is doing, where the strengths are, where we need to move up and we need to, put in extra efforts and all. So there, I'm sure all of us are doing that. We are starting with the scores, with the analytics in the beginning, to that extent that we are going for individual development programs for students. Even parents are involved into it. Target setting is being done when, students are taken what they have done in previous classes, or even much before. We have a complete trail. That is what we are following, and we are analyzing, okay, here the graph goes little up, here the graph goes little down, and then the data which we are preserving is used to understand the graph is going up. So analytics, how we are doing, what is the reason, what could be the reason, how it can be brought forward and all. So this is one way where we are using data for students. Now coming on to the second aspect, motivating students for use of data. Here comes the requirement, converging and diverging from the first point, talking about achievement scores of students. Now, if I am a student, what I need to do, I need to score good marks. Of course, when I'm talking about holistic development, growth, persona, all the schools and all the curricula are doing different things. I'm just keep it aside because I'm sure some question can come up on that it is not only the rote learning or the outcome and all, which we've been hearing in number of forums. So that's why I'm keeping that holistic development, just talking about data, the use of data for the students, use of data by the students, and use of data by the society for benefit of the students and for the society as a whole. So coming on to second point, when we are talking about use of data by the student, I am a student, I'm studying something, I know where I stand, but then how do I analyze where I stand and where I go up. There again, the same data which probably the school is using comes back to me. I remember, I mean, as Mr. Philip was talking about in the beginning, least we knew that time when I was a student that there is something called data analysis. But I do remember when the papers marks as a student in 9th and 10th class, I'm talking about, when the papers, teachers were showing paper, I mean, I was probably in first 5 or something, everybody aspiring to be the first one. So what we used to do, we used to write, okay, physics marks given, who's coming first? Now chemistry marks came up, who's topping? Now mathematics mark came up, I came down. So probably that was also the beginning of the era where we were talking about data, use of data, and then thinking, oh, I have to work hard in mathematics because I lost by 2 points or I lost by 0.5 marks or something like that. So that is where there is a requirement to understand for a student and for the educationist fraternity to make students understand as to how they need to analyze data, being where they are, understanding the graph. I'm telling you nothing out of the way, but I'm telling you what we are doing it in our organization. And then I mean, of course, the spade work is done by the organization, plotting the graph and seeing, okay, this is going up, this is going down. And here the analysis comes up. The team of teachers, team of educationists sit down and analyzes, involving parents, involving students, and understanding the flow to understand the process flow. So that is use of data by the students. And that doesn't stop here. Use of data by students starts here when they think that they need to focus for their academic process of growth, not academic growth. Academic growth carries forward with so many other things. And then beyond that, it is to be understood, probably they understand also that data is what we say currently. Of course, I will put it in 3 different subsets, but data is power. Little while ago, when we were not so much focused on data or data driven, then we used to say time is money. But if I say data is money, there'll be no second thought on it. And more than the educationists these days, students know that data is money, and that is how they are very well into it. And we in our organization are doing in a very, very organized way, working for students for analyzing data, worked by students when the data importance has been understood by them, and then using it, inculcating a thought process in their mind that this data is going to be used. Now, taking it a wider horizon, if I talk about data, I can put it across in 3 baskets: a bliss, danger, and a process flow, which includes awareness about the danger and taking the bliss forward with a factor which can count IQ, EQ, SQ, AQ, everything. So I'll talk about these 3 and then I will stop. I hope I'm not taking a lot of time. If I am, then don't smile. I will understand that I'm in a danger zone, so I have to do fast forward. Okay, so, bliss, of course, Mr. Achan has spoken so much as far as data as bliss is concerned. As an organization, being part of a corporate body, my educational organization does analyze data a lot, talking about, we have softwares where we analyze data when we talk about customer care, requirements going forward. Now, why I am talking about it, this is not the forum, but why I am talking about it is everything benefits a student. When an organization analyzes the data on social media as to what are the good comments and what are the bad comments, and those bad comments are taken forward to be understood, to be analyzed, and to be brought forward in a way tomorrow it highlights and then it benefits the students. So that is another thing. And then being a soldier from armed forces, if I won't talk about data in forces, probably that will be, I'll not be justifying by being what I am. So, many of us watch movies and that's how we know forces. But much beyond that, In forces, we are using a lot of data when we are analyzing a terrain, in sand model exercises, planning for war, planning for anything and everything. Now you must be thinking, you asked me a question for students and I'm talking about war. Here, what I'm trying to tell you is the importance of data to be understood by all. It is not only that we are educationists, so we need to only focus on that. Yes, the third factor where Mr. Achin said ethical use of data, I would say, I used to wonder when this Facebook and other things started, how come so many facilities, even WhatsApp, without a cost involved? Least I realized is it is my name, my number, my email ID, which is giving me this service free of cost. And that is the reason so many calls come, so much of your data is sold. You fill a form, you go to mall initially first, when we were not so mature, we used to go to mall, this is your, lucky draw, you fill in the details and all, and the coupon will come and will give you. And then you start getting different calls on different angles. So that is where the data is dangerous. And then some ethical part which Mr. Achin has already discussed. So that is where we need to be very, very careful in use of data wherever we are, whether we are using for educational organization, we are nurturing students to understand and inspiring data orientation. That's what the topic is for today. So when we talk about inspiring everybody for data orientation, these are the aspects which need to be told to them that from here your relay race starts. Now coming on to the summing up part of it. As educational organization, everybody uses data. I'm also using. The social aspect, I have already spoken that we need to be very careful when we use data, when we share data, when we analyze data. And as far as ethics goes, we define our ethics. Otherwise, if we don't define this and we say it has to be generalized, we may understand that probably many things which are happening under the banner of ethical use of data in an ethical manner. And there were stories about certain social media in past also. Yes, data is helpful, whether in my grocery shop or my store, I need to keep 10 pastries or 100 pastries, analyzing the inflow of customers coming in, or when my company is going for due diligence tomorrow for merger and or acquisition or brownfield or greenfield, whatever it is. But in between these two extremes, it is the conscious mind, and it is a space, as Mr. Philip said in the beginning, where the human angle to be understood, that data to be analyzed, not just with the output data gives, but also to understand that how we use it in a particular forum. For example, I'll make it simple. Teachers coming from that particular country are very good. Teachers coming from this particular country are not good. Students coming from that particular country are wonderful. The product coming from that particular country is of higher quality, whereas from the X country is not. There is no yardstick. And then beyond everything, when we talked about, he himself was talking about an incident when about some natural disaster where the demand for particular type of pastries increased. So there are external factors. The bottom line is there are external factors beyond what we read and what we know, which add value to final analysis of data, which also need to be understood by us as educationists, and also need to be taught to our students, because they should not feel as raw minds taking education and system from us that data is the bliss, so let us carry on with that. Besides and beyond that, there is a requirement where these values, if I can say, or the factor, whether we call it emotional quotient or social quotient, need to find its place when we talk about data analysis, use of data, and deriving outcome out of data. So that is what I wanted to submit. Thank you so very much for patient hearing. I'll be open for questions probably after the speakers are done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We will come back to you for the next questions. Right now, I'll get across to Mohanty ma'am. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. My question to you is very specific, for the benefit of the audience. Ma'am's school was part of an event that Notebook conducted some time back. It was called Notebook Ignite. We invited schools to become startups, and students had to come up with business plans and business ideas and present it to us. Now, as part of this grooming process, I was interacting with a lot of school students, and the students from the Sanjay Ghuravat International School, I think they were from class 10. Their interaction with me suddenly turned into an interaction about cryptocurrency, big data, and blockchain. Now, I have not come across too many class tenors who would hold that kind of an informed decision making, discussion on such evolved topics. Ma'am, you are clearly doing something that gives your students a tremendous data orientation. We are asking you to share your secret sauce. What gives them that?
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to congratulate Notebook for completion of that 140 episodes. And special congratulations to Subayu, because the one thing of Notebook I like and appreciate the most is the debate. And I have never missed it. And you are an excellent moderator. So coming back to the topic today, as we deal with international curriculum, we deal with Cambridge curriculum, we deal with IB curriculum, and all these international curriculum are embedded with data science. So we do not have any other go, because we have to orient the children from the beginning that they need to have the understanding, because there are a lot of sources are there, a lot of data are available, how to go through or find out the sources of the data, and then how to analyze them, and then how to find out the valuable data, which are very, very important, because sometimes it happens that they go to the very, very popular sites and collect certain things, and then they need to be guided that what are the sites, what are the citation, what are the authentic one, how they need to do their research, how they need to collect data. So all these things are the part and parcel of their teaching learning process. So they're been encouraged to explore, to experience, to have the hands-on experience. So that is how the students are being trained, and they come to know about variety of new things, and it's all about what they study and what we practice in school. So basically, when we take a child, I would tell that what kind of practice we have when we admit a child, we have a baseline test for the child. So that baseline test becomes the data for us, in what condition we had taken the child, what were the different IQ, performance, aptitude, everything is been stored. And then we keep measuring that at the end of the year, what is the development of the child. And in each and every aspect of the child development, we have the data. So whether it is sports or it is co-curricular activities, it's about the communication skills, it's about participation in different events, activities, whatever it is. For class-wise, individually, we keep collecting and maintaining all the data. And this is how they've been trained, teachers have been trained. So we collect for the teachers. For example, if we have to have the data that how many teachers have completed 2 vaccines, because it's a big institution having so many staff, some are contractual, some are permanent. So we have all the detailed information about each one of them, which give in one shot, we understand that, okay, these are the things what's going on in the school. So teachers are oriented for encouraging and maintaining the data for variety of purposes, to make their teaching interesting, to make the students to have variety of projects. So when the students, they take up the project, it's a very important aspect of our teaching in the school. Whether it is CBSE or it is Cambridge, students have to do project. So when they do any project, the first thing start with collection of data. For example, we have in IB extended essays, we have in IB CAS project, we have TOK is nothing but critical thinking, collection of data, connection. So all these things are being taught to the students through their curriculum. Very frequently, they keep on doing variety of projects, and that is how they are, at par with the students when it comes to the curriculum and the students in different parts of the world. So they are updated, and this is what we do with the students. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And if I may say so, your students are doing wonderfully well. I keep going back to that discussion. I think it was at night 10 o'clock. Two of your students kept asking me questions about blockchain, and I was blown away. It was a beautiful discussion we had. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Rashmi ma'am, thank you, ma'am. Rashmi ma'am, let me come to you next. Ma'am, we are looking at a generation of students who unfortunately consume news on Facebook and get informed on WhatsApp. Now, being critical about the source of your data is fundamental to any data science. What are the steps that your school takes to ensure that your students know how to filter data based on their sources? Ma'am, you'll have to please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Yes, ma'am. It's fine, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Good evening, all. First of all, I'll thank Notebook and Mr. Subhayu for giving me this opportunity. I feel privileged to sit in this elite panel. And now coming to the use of data and how students are taking and how we are filtering them and a kind of protecting them from the odds of the social media and the I will say bad kind or wrong uses of data. Before that, I want to share with you all one experience which we had just last month. We all are, as board exams are going on, and before that we had conducted mock tests. So we observed after 2 days, first 2 days, suddenly the attendance of the students went down drastically, and which was 100% initially, that came down to mere 40% or 30%. We were surprised what happened, and we in our school immediately after their test, now the tests are going on OMR sheet, so we had practice of teachers evaluating that and then collecting data where to we need to give more input and where to strengthen the weaker and tightening the knots. So we found this, and when next day I called one of my good student and asked him what happened. After 2 days, you all are keeping absent from this test. What is the problem? This is an important test. You should all should be there. Then he said, "Ma'am, most of the questions in the previous two papers were from the different practice books and sample papers. So we can easily solve it. We already have those. So what is the need of us coming to the school and giving these tests?" I was taken aback, to be very honest with all of you. I called my exam in charge and other senior faculty members. I said, "What is happening?" So this is the power of data. I would say that the child they could make us analyze the situation, and then we immediately we went on a corrective step, and we informed that no, you are supposed to come and you will find the difference. And then again the things came back on the right track. So this is a small example which I wanted to share with you all. Now coming back what you are talking about. Ranchi is a little less developed city as compared to other metropolitan cities or internationally. But yes, social media access to that is available to all our students. So what we have done, we have during this pandemic, it also helped us. And again, here the data played an important role, and we established many e-clubs. And through those e-clubs, we on a weekly basis, we started taking feedback, what they have observed new on different social media platforms. So in this way, we try to read the mind of our students, try to find out what are the topics or what are the sites or what are the things that they are frequently visiting, or it's their choice or it is becoming favorite with them. And then we started filtering from there, and slowly and slowly, still the process, I won't say is complete, is going on, because someday the other thing comes up. And we know nowadays the way data and the information and the uh, personal thoughts, personal views are, it's flooded. It's means it's what we like say, it's overflowing everywhere, and it becomes very difficult for a child who is just 14 years, 15 years age to analyze what is wrong and what is right, where what he should go and uh, make himself or herself more into that, and where are the, what are the sites or where are the places where they should gauge themselves. So we, these e-clubs helped us a lot, and the in charges there, they on a weekly basis they talk to the children and they find out. And in this way we I would share again here that we were lucky enough, or my teachers have done a fantastic job, and many sites, many sites we found which earlier we were not knowing, which are very helpful to the students. It's helping them in their studies. They are able to visit and come to know for newer things. They are able to experiment. They are able to they have started their own blogs, they have started writing blogs, they have created their own YouTube channels. And in this way, in a positive manner, from what was all scattered and everyone was doing in his own or her own way, now we have channelized that, and we have put it, we are trying to put it on a track, on a channel, so that students get the positive benefit out of it. As my earlier predecessors were speaking about, and there was a question also that is data overrated. So here I want to say that India is the biggest global centers of data-driven decision making in the IT industry. Data is not overrated, but again, it is not the only thing that should form our decisions. Indian professionals possess great professional ethics, personal values, and the socio-culture. We are so diversified in our culture, and we have a worldview that together provides a unique lens through which we look at data and arrive at insights that are so valuable. And that's the reason probably that the world's biggest corporation hire us, the Indians, as their CEOs. With this, I like to conclude. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking us through that journey. Since you raised that question, is data overrated? Shashmita ma'am, do you think so too? I mean, data in and of itself is perhaps useless. It's just numbers lying somewhere. But its role that it plays in decision making, are we giving it too much importance? Because maybe 10 years back it was not that important and decisions were still being made. Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Shashmita ma'am, you are on mute.
Sorry.
No worries.
So I would quote here Captain Dinisha Bharadwaj. She said that earlier the children used to take down the marks and they used to compete who has got 1 mark more, 1 mark less. So from there the things used to be there, but it was not taken up a bigger stage like this. But today's situation and 21st century generation, it's all about data science. So and this is the future of the entire world. So what I feel that, there should be proper, students need to be, and the adults also need to be trained that how to, use the data in a proper way. Sometimes it happens, there are many wrong things, wrong informations, escalated one which comes. So we need to, like the present situation of pandemic. Just 2 days back, the news was coming, everything is going to be closed, these many things. So we need to understand what is fact and what is not, what to be accepted and what need not to be, and what are the different other sources by which we can find out the correct data and believe. So people, particularly the students, the youngsters, they need to be trained about it. Otherwise, what happens, they are going to go under the influence of the wrong data, and then it would lead to gossips, it would lead to wrong decision making. All these things will happen. So they need to be knowing the process, how to analyze data and what to accept and what to reject. So if they have been trained from the childhood, so they would form their own opinion. For example, we read newspaper, there are variety of things are there, good, bad, so many things are there, supporting, disadvantages, advantages, but the reader should know what to take and what to leave. So in that manner, even the youngsters, they need to be trained that how to analyze the data, how to, data analytics should be a very, very strong, and it should be taught in the school, how to process the data, and that would help.
Wonderful,
And
ma'am.
exaggeration will not happen.
Wonderful. Captain Singh, if we can come back to you, ma'am. You are in Malaysia, and by virtue of that, I'm quite sure you deal with a very multicultural milieu of students on a daily basis. Do you see this as a very Indian problem? Because honestly speaking, today we're talking to elite schools which are at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, the amount of fake news and fear mongering that is going on through social media is appalling. Do you see that as a cultural issue? Do you see it in other places? Do you see Indians as an advantage when it comes to data?
I probably would like to bifurcate your question. Just one second. I'm so sorry, the phone rang. So I would bifurcate your question in two parts. One is that the data flowing or the information flowing, what to receive and what not to receive. And second thing is that, is it a cultural issue? Is that your question? Am I right? Right. So one thing is that though it is universal thing that all kind of data, because everything is in everybody's hand these days. Everything is stopped. The entire world has come to your mobile, and that is, and it is, there is no restriction, no guidelines, no protocols. Though in Malaysia we have guidelines, like against the government, against the system. You cannot float in as it happens in India. Anybody, whatever comes to somebody's mouth on words under the expression of speech, one speaks everything. It is not like this here. It's a punishable offense. But besides that, some or the other tidbits of information keeps floating up and down. But yes, your question is very right that it is more in India under the expression of speech. And sometimes here when we call, we speak to various nationalities and we talk about it. People do use a term for this, and my boss is Malaysian, so he always uses the term over democracy, which is which comes, in handy in this, that anybody is saying anything. Now coming on to it, how much, now where is the wisdom prevailing? How much is to be received and what not to be received? And there comes, probably people know it, but still it becomes a charm that, okay, it has come to my desk, so I should forward it further. I don't know what is the purpose and what is the psyche behind it, which misleads people, which misguides people. As a little while ago, Ms. Sashmita was talking about, that as information has started floating in about the new virus and all, and the decisions have already come up that this quarantine will happen, this has happened. What is the authenticity? What we are doing? I'm sure some level something is happening, but is it so grave that immediately we have to jump onto conclusion? So I would just close my answer by adding one thing. She was talking about what to be analyzed and what not to be. I would also like to add about that how it has to be interpreted and used, and that how part is supposed to be taken care of certain segment of society. Probably I find this need now to come forward, and we need to educate everybody. When we are in educational organization, I can talk about students, parents, and rather than going in a wider perspective, I can say embracing the entire society, because communication, having less communication or no communication or being underinformed is bad, but being wrongly informed is worse, because you are impacted and you are impacting others. So how data to be used, what to be used and what not to be used, and more than that, how you need to discard certain things, that wisdom level has to prevail and set in. That is what I feel very, very strongly. This has to start somewhere officially.
Wonderful, ma'am. I think that is definitely the need of the hour. The last question that I'll just go around the table with. Once you data-orient a student, when the student starts truly believing in the value of data, they will actively go out, seek information, filter the sources, and then develop very strong insights based on the data that they have consumed. Now, in my experience, it also tends to make them a bit argumentative, which is a problem bit for the parents to deal with. Rashma, if I can start with you, how do you deal with parents coming to you and saying, listen, my son is reading up too much, not listening to me? What's the solution?
Yeah, it's a very practical question, and we are facing these. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So we are facing nowadays the instances of this kind as they are increasing day by day, where the parent comes complaining that the child is not listening to him or her, and he has his own ways. So here, see, especially in our area, most of the parents, they are busy in earning and trying to, they are more focused in their own careers, and they have very less time for the students, to for their children. So they get free time, and they hover on whatever is available to them, as we just discussed, and then they form their own insights. They don't listen exactly or follow what their parents are saying, and this is what we started. Mr. Philip has said about it, and Mr. Achin also, about the STEM learning. So if we want students to grow and think independently, be more creative, be more innovative, which is the demand of the today's world, then we have to give them some or the other kind of freedom. And we should not expect them in such a scenario to follow word by word what their parents are saying or what even we teachers are saying, because we have also been taught up and brought up with a certain set of mind frame, and in our days we had all these kind of what will I say, developments or studies were not prevailing as it is prevailing, and are easily accessible to each and every people who is in education sector or in the society on a large. So we must allow students to think independently, explore independently, and then try to form his or her own insight. It may be different from his or her parent, doesn't matter. But as far as it is, the child is moving on the right track, he's showing development, then we should not be very critical of him, and we should not be after him every time. So we try to make the parent understand this, and still the struggle is on, but we keep on telling them that now you have to, these are 21st century children, and we need to treat them like that if we want them to doing or excelling in the world. So that's how we are dealing with. We tell them that learning is not a competition where each one has to compete with the other and measure their achievement by scores and the marks only. There are other areas, other set of skills that the child must develop, and if it is to be like that, then we have to be little more liberal or lenient in our ways. Thank you.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Captain Singh, if we can come to you next, ma'am.
I would just start with I'll give you an example on this. My husband's brother's son, he's into gaming and too much into a lot of games, and he has his game channel and everything, and he enjoys doing it. So then parents started telling him, don't play, you're not studying, you need to focus on academics, it affects your eyes, everything and all. So he found out some data analysis and studies saying gaming strengthens your neuromotor, combination, and that helps you to strengthen your system, and that will help you to be more analytic in future, and you can be best person to use simulators in future, and blah blah blah, and that's it. So now he's right. This is data analysis, which says more onto gaming. You have your neuromuscular coordination in a better way. You can do wonders. You strengthen your system. You become a better person. Is that enough argument? There comes the answer to your question. Yes, children, everything is in their hand, and they know, and the data analysis and research. But something which we need to do is, I did horse riding, as you were reading in this thing. When the horse is notorious, it is this kind of thing is put. I forget the name. What is it? This kind of thing is put in. Yeah. So then the horse is, because when the horse sees like that, it bucks. So instead of that, this is put. So the horse starts seeing. This time, when my age, my mental faculties have not grown so much, I start believing in what I read. That is not sufficient. And there comes the requirement of we people, educationists and parents, to widen the horizon of visibility, that what you are reading is right. But besides that, there is something called screen time. Besides that, there is something called overboarding something. Besides that, there is something called academics, which is waiting for your growth. Besides that, there is something called sports, where neuromuscular is not only restricted to this, your muscular thing also to develop your growth faculties to get nurtured. There is a lot. Now, that is the second aspect, that how we need to tell the child and to widen the horizon. But most important part is how to do it. Because all our children, my 12-year-old also tells, Gyan nahi, no more lecture. Because if you give it like that, they won't receive it. Madam is smiling. Every child says that to parents. And even as educationists, many of the parents, they come to us, he's not listening to us. Can you do something for us? And 2 days back, there was an African lady who walked up and she said, my son says, for this COVID thing, we need to do everything. It has to become automatic. So I don't want to go to school because I have to touch that. I have to touch that. So, and he refuses to come to school because the complaint went from the school that he is not coming. So I said, okay, get him along and I would like to meet him. When I met him, he said, yes. I said, okay, you prepare. And he's in standard fifth or something. I said, okay, you plan a proposal, come to me, and then we will work on the budget, and then I'll make you in charge of that system. You will work with the operations team, and then let us get everything on without touch because of COVID. So he said, yeah. I said, till then you come to school, because then that whatever you are missing in school, that will not help you to plan the proposal. He's coming back to school. Mother kept telling he was not coming to school. So there is some tactics where we need to motivate. It is not only the students of current era. Remember when we were young, I also used to tell my dad, no, this is not done. You should not do like that. I used to tell my mom, your education is outdated. What we do is something different. Why do you think that this should be done like this? This can be done like that also. It is generations. generations change, and that young age, everybody thinks that what I know is my wisdom, and rest everybody is the outdated. So here we need to understand to widen the horizon and how to do it. That tactics is very important, because when I have to fill in water in this glass, I cannot put a lid over it, or I cannot put it upside down to fill it in. I have to keep the surroundings open. That we need to do as educationists. That will help.
What a wonderful imagery, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Shashmita ma'am, I'll come to you last. Ma'am, how do you deal with parents? Are they complaining at all?
Yeah, actually, I deal with different categories of parents. The parents, those they belong to Cambridge and IB, they have certain timetable for all the activities what the students have to do, their children have to do. And in CBSE side, we see parents come and they say that too much of use of gadgets and all those things they say. But then what we do, we have made our core value system so strong in school that there should be use of everything in limits. And we keep on stressing these things every way through our different practices. We keep them engaged completely. We have a boarding school, so there is a time for everything. So that time over, then nothing is within that time, whatever they have to do, they have to do. That is one thing. We keep a lot of orientation and counseling for the students. So we invite counselors, those they are professional counselors. So they talk to the students, then talk to the parents. Then because it's a unit which is closely bonded. So if one person is not doing the job properly, then the entire chain get affected. So we try to keep the chain intact. So we work on parents, we work on children, we work on teachers. So we work on everyone and see to it that what they're supposed to be, how much need to be given to them of everything they should use and use in a responsible manner. Because the curriculum itself teaches them how to be responsible. The attribute of Cambridge is to be responsible, engaged, creative, innovative, a decision maker. So all these are embedded day in and day out. They are learning and practicing. So it is under control. So I don't face much difficulties from the side of the students and the parents.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for this wonderful discussion. Wish we could go on, but we are just over time, so we'll draw it to a close. Just to reiterate, Rashmi ma'am, thank you so much for being here. We excuse me, really enjoyed listening to you. Particularly, ma'am, when you spoke the analysis of a question paper that quick, that's extremely impressive. That's really show data mindset. And also, we do the social media habits. That I think was particularly interesting. I mean, there are a lot of schools which kind of battle the whole social media thing, but the way you've embraced it and you're kind of molding it into better academic outcome is, I think, a very, very smart move, ma'am. Congratulations and thank you once again for being here today. Thank you so much. Sushmita ma'am, once again, winning data science becomes a fundamental to these curricula. I do hope a lot of that percolates back into the CBSE school as well, and the students there benefit as well. And ma'am, what you said last about the orientation and counseling, that is so important because data orientation is a mindset. If the entire ecosystem becomes more data oriented, more data savvy, then all decisions, all conversation is based on facts and not, just people having prejudices. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Captain Singh, once again, thank you so much for being here, ma'am. I know in your time zone it becomes a little more difficult, and we are so thankful for you accommodating us that way. Particularly, ma'am, when you said about your data being used on social media, a very interesting quote came to mind. That said that if you're not paying for a service, you're not the customer, you're the inventory. So I think that has been used against us. But also, ma'am, the initial statement that you made about data being used by, of, and for the students tells us how democratized perhaps data usage is. To the wonderful audience that we've had today, once again, thank you so much for being with us. And I hope you really enjoyed the session today. Mr. Barich sir, it cannot end without me thanking you. As always, a brilliant opening to this topic that we could not have done without. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good day. And we shall see you in our next episode.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, ma'am.